The KF and KF Junior European Championships 2014 take off at the Conca di Muro track in the south of Italy near Lecce. This first race sees on its starting grid nearly 150 participants amongst the best in the world. All it takes is a look at this entry list to realize how competitive and exciting the challenge will be for the conquest of the European KF title, by many regarded as the queen of all classes, with the presence of the Englishman Tom Joyner, current KF world champion, looking to reconfirm his title in a bid to move up to single-seater racing. The same goal is also coveted by another young English driver who goes by the name of Lando Norris, always among the leaders, always at the front, fighting for those positions that matter, and this year aiming to add to last year's title of European Junior KF champion, even that of the top class. Italy also has its array of contenders, most notably Alessio Lorandi. Last year he earned the KF Junior World Champion title, whilst this year he will be disputing his last karting season before moving to motorsport, in the hope of maybe one day in the future getting behind a Formula One wheel. Even in KF Junior the battle will be tough, considering the many young contenders wanting to claim the continental title. But before going back to La Conca, let's take a moment to review some of the images of when we last saw the drivers who disputed the 2013 European season. WSK Promotion organised a magical night in Milan to assign the year's titles at the presence of the top sporting authorities. The event was held at Spazio Antologico, a charming and historical venue which has been refitted as a film studio and regularly hosts important presentations. The evening proved to be a great success and presents a great opportunity for the drivers to aspire to be the stars of next year's end-of-the-season gala. So, with the 2013 season behind, the chase for the 2014 KF and KF Junior titles begins. At La Conca, an entire day of free practice is dedicated to fine-tuning, followed by the KF Junior qualification sessions. The challenge immediately hits the highest level. There are multiple fast laps and many aspiring candidates to the first pole position of the season. Only between the first 10 drivers, the difference is 240 milliseconds. 3 minutes from the end of the session, it is the Englishman Inam Ahmed to score best time, only to be beaten a few moments later by the promising German Mick Jr. Then it is the turn of American Logan Sargent to conquer the provisional pole, until another German, David Beckman, further improves the time by lowering it by 21 milliseconds. But finally, under the checkered flag, it is the American Devlin DeFrancesco to astonish all, with an incredible time which definitively assigns him the first pole position of the season.
Everything was okay. We put everything together for the qualifying and went out and was pole. It was really good. Not really. The team put everything together. I fixed the corners where I make mistakes, and we come together and make pole position.
If amongst the young KF Junior drivers, the balance displayed in qualifying makes it hard to make any predictions, in KF it is the English Lando Norris who conquers an incredible pole which none of the opponents is able to even come close to. The reigning KF Junior European champion, at the wheel of his Fernando Alonso, distances the Spanish Pedro Hiltbrand, author of the second time with his CRG, by half a second. Third time goes to another suitor to the European title, Callum Ilott from the UK, behind the wheel of Zanardi. Fourth place in qualifying goes to the Frenchman Gabriel Abruy, who places his Tony Kart in front of Niklas Nielsen's Cosmic. The Danish driver is another candidate for the title, as is the Italian Alessio Lorandi, who comes in with an overall 8th place. Now let's hear Lando Norris, author of the pole position.
I think it was a really good lap, obviously. Still a few places I could have improved looking through the data after, but yeah, I think we got the easy bit of work done, so now we have the heats and just keep up the good work and see what we can do.
Saturday is dedicated to the qualifying rounds of this first European race weekend, and in KF Junior, Devlin De Francesco immediately shows he means business. The American scores 3 victories in 4 heats, confirming his determination and the proficiency of his vehicle. If De Francesco is the candidate to the final victory, the young Mick Jr. definitely proves to be one of his most forceful opponents. The German driver earns 2 victories and 2 placements, which put him right next to De Francesco in the first row of the pre-final. Other notable names aspiring to the high ranks of this pre-final are the Venezuelan Sebastian Fernandez and the Spanish Eliseo Martinez in second row. Third row sees Inam Ahmed from the UK, undeniably another of the many hopefuls aspiring to the continental title. If KF qualifying revealed the superiority of Englishman Lando Norris, the qualifying heats opened up hope for some of his opponents. Norris earned the pole position of the pre-final thanks to 4 victories in 4 heats, and at his side we find fellow countryman Callum Ilott, winner of 3 out of 4 qualifying rounds, whilst behind them come a pair of forceful and highly motivated drivers, the Dane Niklas Nielsen and Pedro Hiltbrand from Spain, preceding an all-Italian third row with Alessio Lorandi and Felice Tiene also aiming for the highest steps of the podium. Lando Norris will be hard to beat, but the competition is certainly fierce. Just a few minutes before noon on Sunday, the drivers and teams are summoned on the track to form the lineup for the KF Junior pre-final. De Francesco, fast as lightning, instantly conquers the lead. Behind him are the Venezuelan Fernandez, followed by German Mick Jr. Then Englishman Ahmed and Spaniard Eliseo Martinez. In front, Devlin De Francesco is a real fury. In the first lap, he gains an advantage of 0.7 of a second, partly also thanks to the sequence of overtaking taking place at his shoulders between Ahmed and Mick Jr., respectively in second and third place, having both bypassed the Venezuelan Fernandez. De Francesco sets a wild pace, and Ahmed makes up for a few tenths of seconds in the first few laps, but without ever catching the American driver. The race continues at high speeds with Ahmed chasing De Francesco, but the American, who had lost almost 4 tenths in the third lap, rapidly regains ground, dimming Ahmed's hope of getting close. Meanwhile, in the back, the Belgian Ulysse Depot, who had started the race in 18th place, is the author of a fantastic comeback, which grants him the chance to fight for second place in the last lap with Inam Ahmed. The checkered flag finally sees Devlin De Francesco win, having entirely dominated the spree final, followed by the spectacular second place that Belgian Depot was able to steal from Inam Ahmed, allocating him a deserved placement in the first row of the final. The second pre-final is that of the KF, which sees in Englishman Lando Norris the man to beat. Lando starts well, but is immediately challenged by Callum Ilott, Daruvala and Hiltbrand, who relegate him to 4th position at the first turn. By the end of the first lap, Hiltbrand and Ilott are side by side, and it is Ilott who gains the lead by the start of the second lap. In the meantime, after a couple of inconclusive laps, Lando Norris picks up the rhythm and in the second lap is able to successfully attack Durvalas, gaining 3rd place for the space of a few turns. But he is overtaken by Danish Nielsen, putting him back in 4th place again. Callum Ilott keeps pushing hard, putting important tenths of seconds between him and his opponents. On 3rd lap, Lando Norris successfully attacks Niklas Nielsen's 3rd position, a duel which slows down somewhat his pace, easing Ilott and Hildebrand's flight. Hence the start of Lando Norris's run-up to the 2nd place, held by Spanish Pedro Hildebrand, proving to be successful on the 10th lap. When Norris conquers the 2nd place, Callum Ilott is more than 3 seconds away, too many to hope to equal him at this point. In conclusion, the pre-final results see Callum Ilott in pole position, Lando Norris in 2nd place, and Pedro Hildebrand in 3rd position for the finals lineup. On Sunday afternoon, the 2 finals of this first round of the European Championship promised to provide the fans at La Conca with 2 very exciting races. And a few minutes before the start, the historic flag throwers of Oria enter the track, flanking the drivers fully kitted in overalls and helmets to receive the cheers from the crowd and greet the local authorities. The historical flag throwers and musicians of Oria have been active for over 20 years, promoting their very special local traditions and performing strictly in period costumes all over Italy and abroad. It is an exciting moment, and a series of fireworks officially marks the start of the 2 European finals. It's 2 in the afternoon when the finalists of the Junior KF are summoned for lineup. In pole position is the American driver Devlin De Francesco of the Morsicani racing team, after having dominated in qualifying. Alongside the American is the revelation of the pre-final, the Belgian Ulysse Depot, author of a great comeback, having moved up from 18th to 2nd place and now deservedly placing his Cosmic on the front row. 2nd row for another suitor to the European title, Englishman Inam Ahmed and James Pull from Singapore. In 3rd row, we find the budding German Mick Jr. from Tony Racing, and by his side, Spanish Eliseo Martinez on a CRG. Ahmed starts well, whilst De Francesco is hit by Mick Jr. at the entrance of the first turn and ends up in the dirt, a maneuver which costs him different positions, whilst Mick Jr. manages to remain in the trail of Ahmed Inam, conquering the 2nd position. Behind the first 2 are Lorandi, the American Sergeant, the English Tiktum, the Russian Vartayan, the English Futrell, and the Chinese Yang Sun Devil, and De Francesco in 8th position. In the second lap, Lorandi puts the pressure on Mick Jr. The driver of the baby race team clearly wants the second place, but at the third bend, Mick Jr. overtakes Ahmed, thus taking the lead. 2 curves ahead and Sargent overtakes Lorandi, conquering third place. Lorandi will have none of it and overtakes Sargent back, reclaiming his third position. At the beginning of the third lap, Mick is under attack by Ahmed Inam, who takes lead of the race again. Meanwhile, in the back, in a bid to reclaim the front of the race, we witness De Francesco's resurgence in the midst of a cluster of very fast drivers. Following 2 very speedy laps, Inam Ahmed further distances the duo formed by Mick Jr. and Lorandi. But on the 5th lap, Lorandi gains second position with a sharp and accurate overtake of Mick Jr. Meanwhile, in the lead, English Ahmed seems to take flight, while behind him, Mick Jr. is forced to give up even his third place to Sargent. At their rear, De Francesco continues to rebound, now in 5th position, just behind Mick Jr. The challenge between Mick Jr. and De Francesco lasts 1 lap. On exit of the last turn of the 8th lap, De Francesco gets in on Mick's trail, soon conquering the 4th place. Meanwhile, up in command, Ahmed speeds on, but is not able to place a significant distance between him and his trackers. Indeed, shortly behind are Leonardo Lorandi, looking motivated to battle for victory, and Logan Sargent also coming up fast. Sargent trails Lorandi, and the Italian driver manages to keep his cool necessary to defend his second place. All goes well until the turn at the pits, when Lorandi inadvertently leaves a breach open for Sargent to attack his second place. At the end of the 10th of the 21 laps, the Englishman Ahmed commands the race with nearly 8/10 of a second on Sargent, a second on Lorandi, and a second and a half on the other American, Devlin De Francesco, whom in the meantime has overtaken Mick Jr. The race continues with Lorandi seemingly able to respond to Sargent's overtaking, but lap after lap it becomes clear the American is faster. Now Lorandi will have to guard his back from the other American driver, De Francesco. In the 12th lap, Devil De Francesco finally achieves the pass which could grant him at least the third step of the podium. Lorandi is overtaken at the pit bend with a move identical to the one the Italian driver had suffered from the American Sargent. Only 5 laps to go in a race that Ahmed Inam has handled astutely, succeeding in keeping behind a relentless competition. Whenever someone goes to attack, he has always been able to keep a distance between him and his opposers, displaying his really awesome potential. Now only De Francesco is in the mental and technical condition to get close to Ahmed, but to the American's disadvantage is the state of the tyres, impaired by his spectacular comeback. A great show is also put on by Lorandi and the Russian Vartayan, who initiate a spectacular challenge, ending with the Russian conquering 4th position. At the end of the race, the checkered flag proclaims winner of the first round of the KF Junior European Championship the young Inam Ahmed, author of a great race, who transits on the finishing line with arms in the air in triumph. The Englishman is followed by the Americans Logan Sargent and Devlin De Francesco. On the podium, the young drivers are ceremoniously presented their awards by the authorities in attendance. The happiest is no doubt the winner, Inam Ahmed, whilst no doubt Devlin De Francesco yearns to settle the scores in the not-too-distant future.
The final was a hard race for me because the pre-final I was not that quick, and I knew Devlin was slightly quicker than me, so I knew I had to overtake him as quickly as possible, which I did. He left the door open in the first corner, then I went down the inside of him and took the lead. Second, third lap I made a mistake on the second corner, drove off the track myself, and then Mick Jr. overtook me. And then once I cleaned the grass off my tyres, 3 laps later, I overtook him back, and then once I got into the lead, I maintained the gap, and then I think Logan was slowly catching me, but because I stayed consistent, I just about managed to maintain the gap. So I'd like to say thank you to Ricky Flynn Motorsport, my mechanic Boyd, Ole for his amazing engines, my mum, my dad, and Slav.
Whilst the award ceremony of the KF Junior is ending, the drivers of the KF Championship are lining up for the season's first European final. Callum Ilott, winner of the pre-final, is in pole position at the wheel of his Zanardi, fine-tuned by the Zanardi Straka race team. Beside him is fellow countryman Lando Norris, another candidate for the title, having showcased his ability all weekend. Second row for Pedro Hildebrand, a fast and gritty driver who has matured his experience in WSK. Next to the Spaniard is Dutchman Martin van Leeuwen on a Zanardi, whilst third row sees Finnish Nico Kari on his Tony Kart and the Danish Niklas Nielsen. The latter also often seen in the high ranks of the WSK races. No doubt all of them aspiring to win this prestigious award. The start of the race is spectacular, with Ilott conquering the lead, with Hildebrand on his trail, and Lando Norris forced to throw himself to the left in order to grab hold of third place in front of Nico Kari and the Polishman Karol Bast, who starts the race in fourth row. From the very first, Callum Ilott sets a crazy pace, setting the notion he is going to be unreachable for most of the race. Behind him, Lando Norris sparks off a series of attacks on Hildebrand, who fends them off by closing any openings. At the end of the first lap, Ilott is in the lead in front of Hildebrand, Norris, Kari and Bast. The second lap begins with Lando Norris overtaking Pedro Hildebrand, who at the next turn is overtaken also by Kari, thereby losing his third position. Up front, Ilott and Norris are in the midst of a direct confrontation. These are the two drivers who have gained the best results over the weekend. Norris seems determined to attack his opponent. Behind, Kari is also managing to keep up with the high pace. The race continues unchanged throughout the third lap, up to the pit bend, when Norris attacks and overtakes Ilott, who in turn will have none of it and returns to the lead, forcing Norris onto the dirtiest part of the track beyond the curb. Norris loses speed, is caught up by Nico Kari, and in the bend after the finishing line hits the curb, losing all of 5 positions. Sadly, this double blunder rules him out from a potential win. So now Callum Ilott has over a second's advantage on Nico Kari and proceeds in order: the Dutch Van Leeuwen, the Dane Niklas Nielsen, Russian Nikita Sitnikov and Norris Lando. In the next lap, the Dane Niklas Nielsen passes Dutch Van Leeuwen, gaining the third position, while behind Lando Norris is gradually maturing the idea of giving rise to a frantic comeback. After all, the first position is not too far away and the race is still long. So the English pushes down hard, immediately overtaking Sitnikov and aiming for the next opponent. From the pits, the news of Lando's approaching comeback comes to Callum's attention, and he begins to put up the pace of the race, succeeding in distancing lap after lap the Finn Kari behind him. Meanwhile, Lando aims for the Dutchman Van Leeuwen at the pit's bend, but the latter reacts and holds his position. At this point, Norris waits for a full lap. When the two arrive at the same bend again, Norris, on the trail of Van Leeuwen, stalks him like a shadow for all of the straight and the next bend, eventually scoring a great overtake which earns him 4th position. The next prey is Niklas Nielsen, but the Dane is quite far ahead, and it would take various laps before getting anywhere close. Meanwhile, in front of everyone, Callum Ilott continues to push hard his Zanardi, keeping up the pace of the race. So much so that Nico Kari continues to lose key tenths of seconds at every lap. Behind, meanwhile, Lando Norris is still launched at full speed in pursuit of Niklas Nielsen. No doubt a stunning comeback is also made by Felice Tiene, who literally runs wild in the 25 laps of the race and is able to move up from his start in 25th position to a sensational overall 4th place. On lap 15 of the 25-lap race, Lando Norris reaches the Dane Niklas Nielsen and conquers the 3rd place overall. This will prove to be the best result for the British driver. When the checkered flag is lowered on the finishing line, it is Callum Ilott that conquers a well-deserved victory in front of Nico Cari and Lando Norris. On the podium, the happiness of Callum Ilott contrasts with the disappointment on the face of Lando Norris, but no doubt the driver of the Ricky Flynn Motorsport team will have his payback soon.
It was definitely a better situation for me, considering in the qualifying I was second, heats second, so I had the disadvantage in the pre-final, starting second. I thought it was going to go a bit worse, and it actually did at the start. But I managed to hang on and stay third at the start, and then work my way through to first and pull away. Then in the final, I knew I'd get a good start, and then I did. But the second lap, first corner, there was dirt on the track and slowed me down about 4/10 because of tyres getting dirt for the rest of the lap, and the lap after was a bit slower. And then eventually I worked my way to get a bit quicker and win.
At the end of the first of the 4 rounds of the European Championship, the standings read as follows. In KF, Callum Ilott is in command with 34 points. In second place, we find Lando Norris with 26 points, and third place is for Nico Cari with 20 points. In KF Junior, Inam Ahmed ranks first with 31 points. Second place for Devlin De Francesco with 26 points, and third place is for Logan Sargent with 20 points. The first round of the European Championship is finally over, but all its protagonists will be back on track on the 1st of June on the Spanish circuit of Zuera, venue of the second round of the European Championships.